Hello, wonderful people. Welcome to Monkey DFIC, your story destination. We have an absolute treat for you today. What if Luffy was raised by GOLD, Roger? If you're enjoying these stories, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps the stories coming. With that said, let the adventure begin. Chapter 1, The King's Treasure. The sea roared beneath the Oro Jackson as it cut through the waves like they were nothing. Rain pelted the deck, but the crew of the Roger pirates moved with practiced precision, adjusting sails, securing cargo, and preparing for battle. Their target, a heavily armed marine vessel carrying something valuable enough to make the Pirate King himself take notice. GOLD, Roger stood at the bow, his captain's coat flapping wildly in the storm. Rain streamed down his face, but his grin only widened as they closed in on their prey. "Captain, they've spotted us," Scalper Gabon called out, lowering his spyglass. Roger's laugh boomed louder than the thunder. "Good. Wouldn't want to surprise them too much. Where's the fun in that?" Rayleigh appeared at his side, silver hair slicked back from the downpour. "Marine vessel is heavily armed, Roger. More than usual for a transport ship." "They're guarding something important," Roger said, his eyes glinting. "I can feel it." Cannon fire erupted from the marine vessel, splitting the air with smoke and iron. The Oro Jackson veered sharply, dodging most of the barrage while taking minimal damage. "Return fire," Roger commanded, and his crew jumped into action. The battle was fierce but brief. Roger's crew wasn't renowned across the seas for nothing. When they finally boarded the marine vessel, they found the soldiers surprisingly determined, fighting to the last man to protect whatever lay in the ship's hold. Roger cut down the final marine captain standing between him and the lower decks. "You fought well," he acknowledged as the man collapsed. "Now, let's see what you were willing to die for." The Pirate King descended into the bowels of the ship, Rayleigh at his side. They found a reinforced door at the end of a narrow hallway, locked with multiple mechanisms. "Government's getting fancy with their locks," Rayleigh muttered. Roger just laughed and kicked the door clean off its hinges. "Sometimes the direct approach works best, Ray." Inside was a small room with a single guard, a woman who wasn't dressed like the others. She held a pistol in shaking hands, standing protectively in front of what looked like a makeshift crib. "Stay back," she shouted. "I won't let you harm him." Roger raised an eyebrow, sheathing his sword. "Harm who?" A small cry answered his question, the unmistakable wail of an infant. Roger and Rayleigh exchanged surprised glances. "A baby?" "The Marines were transporting a baby?" Rayleigh asked. The woman kept her gun trained on them. "He's being taken to Marine headquarters by direct order of the Fleet Admiral. He's important." Roger approached slowly, hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not here to hurt any children, miss. I just want to know why a baby needs a military escort." Before she could answer, Roger's observation hockey flared. He lunged forward with impossible speed, disarming the woman just as she turned her gun toward the crib, not Roger. "She was going to kill the child," Roger growled, his usual jovial expression gone. "Why?" The woman spat at his feet. "Better dead than in the hands of pirates, especially yours. You don't know what he is." Rayleigh stepped forward to secure the woman while Roger approached the crib. Inside was a baby boy, no more than a few months old, with a tuft of black hair and wide, curious eyes. Despite the commotion, the infant wasn't crying anymore. Instead, he was looking up at Roger with an expression that could almost be called interested. "Well, hello there, little one," Roger said softly, his fierce demeanor melting away. "What's so special about you that the world government wants you so badly?" As if in response, the baby giggled and reached up with tiny hands toward Roger's face. "There's something in here," Rayleigh called, pulling documents from a lockbox beneath the crib. "Marine transfer orders, and look at this." He handed a paper to Roger, who read it while gently picking up the baby. Monkey D. Luffy, Roger read aloud. Son of Monkey D. Dragon. His eyes widened in recognition. The revolutionary. The Marines captured Dragon's son. Rayleigh's voice was incredulous. That explains the security. Not just that, Roger murmured, staring at the child with newfound understanding. Another carrier of the will of D. That's no coincidence, Rayleigh. The baby, Luffy, grabbed onto Roger's finger with surprising strength, still giggling. What are you thinking, Roger? Rayleigh asked, though his tone suggested he already knew and didn't entirely approve. The Pirate King looked down at the infant in his arms, a slow smile spreading across his face. I'm thinking, the Marines don't deserve to raise a child of D. Roger, we can, Roger interrupted. We will. This boy has destiny written all over him, Ray. I can feel it. Rayleigh sighed deeply. We're pirates, not nursemaids. We're whatever we choose to be, Roger countered. That's what freedom means. He turned toward the door, cradling Luffy carefully against his chest. Besides, look at him. He's not scared at all. It was true. While most infants would be wailing in distress amid the sounds of battle and surrounded by strangers, Luffy was calm, even playful, tugging at Roger's mustache with delight. He's a natural-born pirate, Roger declared with absolute certainty. And he's coming with us. The crew's reaction was exactly what Rayleigh predicted, equal parts disbelief, amusement, and concern. A baby? Buggy screeched, pointing dramatically at the bundle in Roger's arms. Have you lost your mind, Captain? Probably, Roger agreed cheerfully. But I'm keeping him anyway. Shanks peered curiously at the infant. He's kinda cute. What's his name again? Monkey D. Luffy, Roger announced. And he's part of our crew now. Crocus stepped forward, the ship's doctor looking skeptical. Captain, with all due respect, a pirate ship is no place for an infant. We have no supplies, no knowledge of childcare, and we're constantly in danger. Then we'll learn, Roger replied simply. We'll get supplies at the next island. And what about when the Marines realize we've taken him? Rayleigh pressed. They'll hunt us even more relentlessly. Roger laughed. Let them try. They already want my head, what's one more reason? As if appreciating the joke, little Luffy giggled too, reaching for Roger's face again. See? The boy gets it. Roger beamed with pride. Shanks leaned in closer. Hey there, little guy. He wiggled his fingers at Luffy, who grabbed them with surprising strength. Whoa, strong grip. He's Dragon's son, Rayleigh explained to the crew. The revolutionary. A murmur ran through the gathered pirates. Dragon's reputation was growing throughout the world as he challenged the world government directly. So he's not just any kid, Skopper mused. He's a valuable political prisoner. He's a child, Roger corrected firmly. And he has the will of D. That means something. The crew fell silent. They all knew about the mysterious D, that Roger himself carried in his name. If this child shared that legacy. But Captain, Buggy protested again, what do we know about raising kids? Roger shrugged. Not much. But we're pirates, we figure things out as we go. I helped raise my younger siblings, a female crew member named Mira offered. I could show you the basics. See? We're figuring it out already, Roger said triumphantly. Crocus sighed in resignation. I'll need to procure proper nutrition for him at our next port. Infants have specific dietary needs. And we'll need clothes, diapers. Mira started listing items. As the crew began discussing the practicalities of having a baby aboard, Rayleigh watched his captain. Roger was letting Luffy grab his finger again, a soft expression on his face that Rayleigh had rarely seen before. You're really serious about this, Rayleigh said quietly. Roger nodded without looking up from Luffy. I am, Ray. This feels right. Important. You know we can't keep him from danger forever. I don't plan to, Roger replied. I plan to teach him to face danger head-on. The sea is in his blood, same as us. He belongs here. Rayleigh studied his oldest friend, sensing there was more to this decision than Roger was saying. What aren't you telling me? Roger finally looked up, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. Nothing gets past you, does it? The truth is. I've been feeling strange lately, Ray. Something's not right with me. What do you mean? Alarm crept into Rayleigh's voice. Nothing immediate, Roger assured him. Just a feeling. But if something happens to me, I want to leave something behind. Something more than just stories and treasure. A legacy, Rayleigh realized. Roger grinned down at the baby, who had fallen asleep in his arms. Exactly. The next generation. And this one, he's special. I can tell. The first year with Luffy aboard the Oro Jackson was a chaotic adjustment for everyone. The feared Roger pirates, terrors of the Grand Line, found themselves learning to change diapers, prepare bottles, and sing lullabies. Roger himself took to fatherhood with surprising enthusiasm, often carrying Luffy around the ship in a sling across his chest while giving orders or even during less dangerous raids. By the time Luffy was 2, he was toddling around the deck, supervised carefully by whoever was on Luffy duty for the day. The entire crew had become his extended family, each member contributing something to his upbringing. Rayleigh taught him balance, holding his tiny hands as he learned to walk on the constantly shifting deck. Pirates need sea legs, little one, he'd say as Luffy giggled and stumbled. Shanks, still a relatively young pirate himself, became something of an older brother figure, entertaining Luffy with exaggerated stories and simple games. You're gonna be a real terror someday, Anchor, he'd laugh as Luffy tried to copy his swordplay with a wooden stick. Crocus monitored his health and growth with the precision of any pediatrician. He's developing remarkably well for a child raised at sea, he reported to Roger during one checkup. Strong and healthy. Even Buggy, despite his initial protests, found himself attached to the boy. Don't touch that, you little monster. He'd yell as Luffy reached for his equipment, but there was no real anger behind it. Roger watched it all with pride and amusement. He'd made good on his promise to teach Luffy about life at sea from the beginning. Even before the boy could talk properly, Roger would point out stars for navigation, explain weather patterns, and describe the creatures that lived beneath the waves. That's a sea king, Luffy, he'd say, pointing at a massive creature breaching nearby. One day, you'll be strong enough to take one down yourself. Luffy would just clap and laugh, fearless even in the face of monsters that would terrify ordinary children. By age 4, Luffy was already showing signs of the man he would become, endlessly curious, surprisingly resilient, and absolutely fearless. He'd climb the rigging despite repeated warnings, jump from dangerous heights only to be caught by panicking crew members, and attempt to join every battle or raid. Stay on the ship, Luffy, Roger would order before heading into combat. Wanna fight too? Luffy would protest, puffing out his cheeks. When you're older, Roger always promised. First, you need to grow strong. After battles, Roger would sit Luffy on his knee and explain tactics, showing him maps and diagrams. Most children would have been bored, but Luffy absorbed it all with bright-eyed enthusiasm, at least until his limited attention span ran out. Life wasn't always raids and adventures. There were quiet moments too, nights when Roger would sit with Luffy on the figurehead of the Oro Jackson, pointing out constellations and telling stories of his adventures. The sea is freedom, Luffy, he'd explain. Out here, a man can be whatever he chooses. I choose pirate. Luffy would declare, making Roger laugh. Of course you do. It's in your blood. The defining moment in young Luffy's life came when he was 7 years old. The Oro Jackson had docked at a small island to resupply, and Roger had brought back a strange fruit as a curiosity, a swirling, purple thing that didn't look like any natural food. A devil fruit, Roger explained to his crew, placing it in a secured chest. Not sure which one, but it could be valuable. We'll figure out what to do with it later. What Roger didn't account for was Luffy's growing skill at sneaking around the ship. The boy had developed an uncanny ability to appear exactly where he shouldn't be, despite the crew's best efforts to keep track of him. That night, while most of the crew was celebrating at a local tavern, Luffy crept into Roger's cabin. He wasn't planning to take the fruit, he was just curious to look at it again. But 7-year-old curiosity rarely stops at looking. Luffy grimaced as he took his first bite. It tastes awful. But having started, something compelled him to finish it. By the time Rayleigh found him, the entire fruit was gone, and Luffy was making disgusted faces. Luffy! Rayleigh shouted, immediately recognizing what had happened. Did you eat that fruit? Luffy nodded, still sticking his tongue out. It was gross, Uncle Ray. Rayleigh knelt beside him, checking him over with concern. Do you feel strange? Different? Luffy shook his head, not understanding the gravity of the situation. Just yucky taste. When Roger returned and learned what happened, he wasn't angry as Luffy had feared. Instead, he seemed almost amused, though there was worry behind his eyes. Well, boy, you've gone and done it now, Roger said, ruffling Luffy's hair. You know what a devil fruit does to a person? Luffy nodded eagerly. They'd encountered enough devil fruit users for him to understand the basics. Special powers. But can't swim. That's right. You've traded the sea for power, Roger confirmed. Now we just need to figure out which power you got. They didn't have to wait long. The very next morning, as Roger was explaining to Luffy why he needed to be more careful, the boy reached for a cup of juice, and his arm stretched a full 3 feet across the table. Luffy screamed in shock. Roger's eyes went wide. The Gomu Gomu no Mi, Rayleigh identified immediately. He's a rubber man now. Luffy stared at his stretched arm in horror. Fix it. Fix it. Roger laughed, despite himself. It can't be fixed, Luffy. This is your power now. You're rubber. To demonstrate, Roger pinched Luffy's cheek and pulled, watching it stretch out like taffy before snapping back into place. Luffy's initial fear quickly transformed into delight. Cool, he exclaimed, experimenting by stretching his own face into impossible expressions. Roger exchanged a look with Rayleigh. Well, it could be worse. Rubber has its advantages. And disadvantages, Rayleigh pointed out. He'll need to learn control. Roger nodded, already thinking ahead. We'll train him. This changes things, but not our course. A rubber pirate. He grinned widely. That's something new. The next few months were dedicated to helping Luffy understand and control his new abilities. His limbs would stretch unpredictably, sometimes sending him flying across the deck or knocking over equipment. He bounced when he fell, which saved him from injury but often meant he bounced right overboard, requiring immediate rescue from the now cursed sea. Focus, Luffy, Roger instructed during one training session. Your body does what you tell it to, not the other way around. Luffy scrunched up his face in concentration, trying to punch a target Rayleigh had set up. His arm shot out, stretching wildly, but went completely off course, knocking over a barrel instead. Sorry. Luffy called out as Buggy yelled in frustration. Roger put a hand on his shoulder. Don't apologize. Try again. Aim with your mind before your fist follows. By his 8th birthday, Luffy had gained reasonable control over his stretching. He could extend his limbs intentionally, though precision remained a challenge. More importantly, he had discovered the defensive advantages of his rubber body. Hit me again. He'd demand of Shanks, who would reluctantly comply with a light punch that simply made Luffy's rubber cheek compress before popping back. You're still taking the impact, you know, Shanks warned. Being rubber doesn't make you invincible. But it helps. Luffy replied cheerfully. Roger watched these training sessions with growing pride. The boy was adapting quickly, turning what could have been a curse into a strength. That was the pirate way, taking whatever fate threw at you and making it work in your favor. The Marines, meanwhile, had never stopped searching for the child they'd lost. As Luffy grew, so did the bounty on Roger's head, with specific mentions of the abducted child in Marine communications. But it wasn't until Vice Admiral Silas took over the pursuit that the pressure truly intensified. Silas was a tall, scarred man with a reputation for ruthless efficiency and a personal hatred for Roger. He had lost his brother in a battle with the Roger pirates years earlier and had been hunting the Pirate King ever since. Roger's gone too far this time, Silas declared to his assembled fleet. Taking a child, Dragon's son, no less, and raising him as a pirate. It's an abomination that cannot stand. The Marines began to appear with frightening regularity wherever the Oro Jackson made port. Spy networks were activated, bounty hunters hired, and allied pirates bribed for information on the boy's whereabouts. Roger took it all in stride, as he did every challenge. They're just giving us more opportunities for adventure, he told Luffy after another narrow escape from a Marine ambush. But Rayleigh could see that the constant pursuit was wearing on his captain. More concerning were the occasional moments when Roger seemed to lose his strength, coughing violently when he thought no one was watching. You should let Crocus examine you properly, Rayleigh urged during one such episode. Roger waved him off. It's nothing. Just swallowed some seawater during that last skirmish. Rayleigh didn't believe him, but he knew better than to press the issue. Roger was the most stubborn man alive. The situation grew more complicated when word spread through the underground that Roger was raising a child. Other pirates, seeing an opportunity to strike at the Pirate King through his adopted son, began targeting the Oro Jackson specifically. Captain Brutus of the Iron Skull Pirates was the first to make a serious attempt. His fleet surrounded the Oro Jackson while it was anchored near a remote island where Luffy was exploring with Shanks. Roger! Brutus bellowed across the water. Send out the boy, and we'll let your crew live. I'll raise him as my own. Roger's response was a cannonball fired personally, which took out Brutus's main mast in a single shot. The battle that followed was fierce, with the Roger pirates outnumbered 3-1. Roger fought like a demon, his blade flashing as he cut down anyone who dared mention Luffy's name. Shanks, meanwhile, had heard the commotion from shore and was rushing back with Luffy in tow. We have to help Dad. Luffy insisted, trying to break free from Shanks's grip. Your father would kill me if I let you near this fight, Shanks replied, holding tight to the squirming boy. We'll circle around to the far side of the ship. But fate had other plans. A contingent of Brutus's men had landed on the island, cutting off their path back to the Oro Jackson. Shanks found himself facing a dozen armed pirates with only his sword and a rubber boy to protect. Stay behind me, Luffy, Shanks ordered, drawing his blade. But I can fight too. Luffy protested. Not today, Shanks insisted, engaging the first wave of attackers. Luffy watched in awe as Shanks moved like lightning, his sword a blur as he cut down 3 men in rapid succession. But there were too many, and one managed to circle behind, lunging for Luffy with a wicked curved dagger. Luffy! Shanks shouted in warning, unable to reach him in time. Acting on instinct, Luffy ducked and thrust his arm forward, stretching it far beyond normal length to deliver a punch directly to his attacker's face. The man went down hard, nose shattered, as Luffy's arm snapped back into place. I did it! Luffy exclaimed in surprise. I hit him. Shanks had no time to celebrate the milestone, engaged as he was with the remaining pirates. Run for the shore, Luffy. Now. Reluctantly, Luffy obeyed, stretching his legs to bound away in huge, awkward leaps that sent him tumbling more than once. He reached the shoreline just in time to see the battle raging around the Oro Jackson. Roger was a whirlwind of destruction on the main deck, his blade cutting down enemies left and right. But even from a distance, Luffy could tell something was wrong. His father's movements, usually fluid and unstoppable, seemed occasionally stilted, as if he were fighting through pain. Luffy's young heart pounded with fear. Without thinking about the consequences, he stretched his arms to grab the railing of the Oro Jackson, launching himself across the water in a wild, uncontrolled flight. "Deowad," he yelled as he soared through the air, drawing the attention of everyone on deck. Roger looked up in shock, just as a particularly violent coughing fit overtook him. He staggered, blood speckling his lips, as Brutus himself closed in for what he thought was a killing blow. Luffy crashed onto the deck, rolling wildly before coming to his feet between Brutus and his father. "Leave him alone," he shouted, tiny fists raised. Brutus laughed. The famous son, come to save his father. How touching. He swung his massive axe in a vicious arc meant to cleave both father and son in one strike. Roger, still weakened, moved to push Luffy aside, but he wasn't fast enough. What happened next would be told and retold by the surviving witnesses for years to come. Luffy, instead of dodging, stepped forward and took the blow directly to his chest. The axe connected with his rubber body and bounced off, the force redirecting back to send Brutus stumbling backward. "I'm rubber," Luffy declared proudly. "Your axe can't cut me." It wasn't entirely true, a sharp enough blade with enough force behind it could still injure him, but Brutus's strike had been hasty and poorly angled. Roger, recovering his strength, seized the moment. He surged forward, blade flashing, and Brutus fell with a single precise strike. The remaining Iron Skull pirates, seeing their captain defeated, quickly surrendered or fled. Within minutes, the battle was over. Roger knelt beside Luffy, checking him for injuries despite the boy's protests that he was fine. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen," Roger said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I've seen plenty of both." "I had to help you," Luffy replied simply. "You looked sick." Roger's expression flickered, but he forced a smile. "Just caught off guard for a moment. Nothing to worry about." Later that night, after Luffy had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from the day's events, Roger called Crocus to his cabin. "I need you to check something," he said quietly. "And I need you to keep it between us for now." Crocus, seeing the serious expression on his captain's face, nodded solemnly. "What are your symptoms?" As Roger listed them, the coughing, the occasional weakness, the blood, Crocus's expression grew increasingly grave. After a thorough examination, the doctor sat heavily in a chair across from Roger. "It's not good news, Captain," he said bluntly. "Without more advanced tests, I can't be certain, but all signs point to a terminal condition. Some sort of degenerative disease affecting your organs." Roger absorbed this in silence, staring out the window at the moonlit sea. "How long?" Crocus hesitated. "Hard to say. Could be years, could be less," Roger finished for him. "I understand." He stood, moving to look at a crude map that Luffy had drawn for him earlier that day. It showed a childish version of the Oro Jackson surrounded by sea monsters and treasure islands, with Dad and Luffy stick figures standing triumphantly on the deck. "Tell no one," Roger ordered. "Especially not the boy. He has enough to worry about." "He'll notice eventually," Crocus warned. "You can't hide something like this forever." Roger's expression hardened with determination. "I don't need forever. Just long enough to prepare him. He's stronger than he knows, our Luffy. But he's still a child." "And what exactly are you preparing him for?" Crocus asked cautiously. Roger turned, a familiar fire in his eyes despite the diagnosis. "For everything. For life, for the sea, for freedom. For whatever comes after I'm gone." He looked back at the childish map, at the smiling stick figure labeled, Dad. "He called me that today, did you hear?" "Not Roger, not Captain. Dad. Roger's voice caught slightly. I need to make sure I deserve that title before I'm done. Crocus stood and placed a hand on his captain's shoulder. You already do. I've never seen a father more devoted. Roger smiled, some of his usual vigor returning. Then I'll just have to be even better tomorrow. Because that boy is going to change the world someday, Crocus. Mark my words. Outside the cabin, unnoticed by either man, small bare feet padded silently away from the door. Luffy had woken for a drink of water and heard voices. He hadn't understood everything, but he'd understood enough. Dad was sick. Dad was hiding it. Dad needed help. With the simple determination of a child, Luffy made a decision right then. He would get stronger, much stronger, so his dad wouldn't have to worry about him. So his dad could focus on getting better. Climbing back into his hammock, Luffy stared at the ceiling, his young mind racing with plans. Tomorrow, he'd ask Rayleigh for more training. He'd practice his rubber powers until they were perfect. He'd become the best pirate son ever. Because GOLD, Roger wasn't just the pirate king to Luffy. He was Dad. And Luffy would do anything to protect him, just as Roger had always protected him. In the weeks that followed, the crew noticed a change in Luffy. The normally carefree, sometimes reckless boy became focused, almost serious, especially during training. He pestered Rayleigh, Shanks, and anyone else who would help him to teach him fighting techniques beyond his age. Again, Luffy would demand after being knocked down for the 10th time in a sparring match with Rayleigh. You're pushing yourself too hard, Rayleigh cautioned. Strength comes with time, Luffy. Don't have time, Luffy muttered, before catching himself. I mean, I want to get strong now. Roger observed this transformation with mixed feelings. On one hand, he was proud of Luffy's dedication. On the other, he worried the boy was losing the joy and wonder that had always defined him. One evening, as the Oro Jackson sailed through calm waters under a brilliant sunset, Roger found Luffy at the bow, practicing punches into the air. Your form is improving, Roger commented, leaning against the railing. But your face looks like you're at a funeral, not a fight. Luffy stopped, breathing hard. Fighting is serious, right? You always look serious when you fight. Roger laughed. Do I? I always thought I was having the time of my life. He demonstrated, swinging an imaginary sword with an exaggerated grin. Fighting for something you believe in should fill you with fire, not drain it away. Luffy frowned, considering this. But what if you're fighting because you have to? Because someone needs protecting? Roger's expression softened. He knelt to Luffy's level, placing both hands on the boy's shoulders. Is that what this is about? You think you need to protect someone? Luffy avoided his eyes, a rare occurrence. Maybe. Me? Roger guessed, his voice gentle. Luffy's head shot up in surprise. How did you? I know everything that happens on my ship, Roger said with a wink. Including little boys eavesdropping outside my cabin. Luffy's lower lip trembled. Are you gonna die, Dad? The directness of the question hit Roger like a physical blow. He'd faced sea kings, marines, rival pirates, and the most treacherous waters in the world without flinching. But this, the fear in his son's eyes, was harder to face than all of them combined. For a moment, he considered lying. A comforting falsehood to ease the boy's mind. But Luffy deserved better than that. Everyone dies eventually, Luffy, he said carefully. Some sooner than others. I'm not well, that's true. But I'm not done yet, not by a long shot. But Crocus said, Crocus is a great doctor, but even he doesn't know everything, Roger interrupted. And he certainly doesn't know how stubborn I can be. He pulled Luffy into a tight hug, feeling the boy's small arms wrap around his neck with rubber-enhanced strength. Listen to me, Roger continued, his voice strong and certain. No matter what happens, you don't need to worry about protecting me. That's not your job. Your job is to grow into your own man, to find your own dreams, and to live life with everything you've got. That's what would make me proudest. Luffy sniffled against his shoulder. But I want to help. Roger pulled back to look him in the eyes. You do help. Every day. You know how. Luffy shook his head. By being exactly who you are. By laughing at danger instead of cowering from it. By making friends with everyone you meet. By seeing adventure where others see only obstacles. Roger poked him gently in the chest. By having the biggest heart on the sea. A small smile finally broke through Luffy's serious expression. Really? Really, Roger confirmed. So no more of this grim-faced training, understand? If you want to get stronger, do it with joy. Fight with a smile that makes your enemies wonder what you know that they don't. Luffy considered this, then nodded decisively. Okay. I'll be the strongest and the happiest pirate ever. That's my boy, Roger laughed, ruffling his hair. Now, how about we raid the kitchen? I think Mira made meat pies today. Meat! Luffy shouted, his usual enthusiasm fully restored. As they raced toward the galley, Roger silently thanked whatever forces had brought this child into his life. He might not have much time left, but he would make every moment count. Because Monkey D. Luffy wasn't just a treasure Roger had found, he was the greatest adventure of the Pirate King's life. Chapter 2, Inherited. 4 years had passed since Luffy's first real battle, and life aboard the Oro Jackson had settled into a new rhythm. At 12, Luffy wasn't just the Pirate King's son anymore, he was a full-fledged member of the Roger Pirates, complete with his own duties and a growing reputation. Dawn broke over the Grand Line as Luffy balanced on the highest yard of the mainmast, his rubber legs wrapped twice around the wood for security. From this vantage point, he could see for miles in every direction. The morning air filled his lungs, salty and fresh, as he scanned the horizon. See anything, Luffy? Roger called from the quarterdeck. Nothing yet. Luffy shouted back, unwinding his legs and dropping to the deck with a rubbery thud. Just water and more water. Roger laughed, though the sound triggered a brief cough he quickly suppressed. That's the sea for you. Nothing but water until suddenly, adventure. Luffy bounded over to his father's side, practically vibrating with energy. His straw hat, a recent gift from Shanks before the red-haired pirate had left to form his own crew, bounced against his back, secured by a string around his neck. When's the next island? Luffy asked, falling into step beside Roger as they inspected the morning activities of the crew. Patience, son. The log pose will guide us when it's ready. Luffy groaned dramatically. But I'm bored. We haven't fought anyone in weeks. Roger ruffled Luffy's hair with a fond smile. A true pirate knows how to appreciate the quiet moments between storms. You hate quiet moments too, Luffy pointed out with a grin. True enough. Roger laughed again, this time covering his mouth as another cough threatened to escape. Luffy pretended not to notice. He'd gotten good at that, pretending not to see the way his father sometimes leaned against railings for support, or how he retired to his cabin earlier than he used to. They had an unspoken agreement, Roger would keep fighting, and Luffy would keep believing he was invincible. Captain, Rayleigh approached, his expression serious. A word? Roger nodded, giving Luffy's shoulder a squeeze. Go help Scopper with the sail adjustments. I need to discuss boring adult things. Boring adult things means treasure or fighting, Luffy declared confidently. I'll be right back. As Luffy scampered off, Rayleigh led Roger to a more private corner of the deck. Your medicine isn't working anymore, Rayleigh stated quietly. It wasn't a question. Roger sighed, dropping the cheerful facade he maintained for Luffy. Crocus is making something stronger. And when that stops working? Rayleigh pressed. Roger, we need to consider, I know exactly what we need to consider, Roger interrupted, his voice firm but low. And I'm not ready yet. I have too much left to do. Too much to teach him. Rayleigh's eyes followed Luffy, who was now enthusiastically helping, or attempting to help, adjust the mainsail under Scopper's watchful eye. He's learning faster than you realize. The boy has your instincts. And his father's recklessness, Roger added with a wry smile. Dragon would be proud. Dragon doesn't even know him, Rayleigh pointed out. You do. And what you've given him these past 8 years is worth more than blood. Roger's gaze softened as he watched Luffy. He deserves more time. So do you, Rayleigh said quietly. But the world rarely gives us what we deserve. Before Roger could respond, Luffy's excited shout cut through their conversation. Ships. I see ships coming our way. Both men immediately shifted focus, Roger pulling out his spyglass to scan the horizon where Luffy was pointing. 3 large vessels were approaching from the west, not marine ships, but massive galleons flying a very familiar flag. Whitebeard, Roger identified, a slow grin spreading across his face despite the serious conversation moments before. Well, now, that's interesting timing. Rayleigh raised an eyebrow. Coincidence? With Edward? Never. Roger tucked away his spyglass. Alert the crew, but no battle stations. This is a social call. How can you be sure? Rayleigh asked skeptically. Roger's grin widened. Because if Edward wanted a fight, he'd have come alone. The crew of the Oro Jackson watched with tense anticipation as Whitebeard's flagship, the Moby Dick, drew alongside them. The other 2 ships maintained a respectful distance, creating a triangle formation with the 2 main vessels at its center. Luffy bounced excitedly at the railing, staring wide-eyed at the enormous whale-shaped ship. It's huge. Even bigger than I remembered. The last time the Roger pirates had encountered Whitebeard's fleet, Luffy had been just 7, and Roger had kept him below decks during most of the tense standoff. This time, he stood proudly at his father's side, eager to witness the meeting of the 2 most powerful pirates on the sea. Edward Newgate himself appeared at the railing of the Moby Dick, his massive form towering over his crew. His signature bicento gleamed in the morning sun, but he held it casually, not in a fighting stance. Roger. Whitebeard's voice boomed across the water. Still sailing with that sorry excuse for a ship, I see. Roger laughed heartily. She's lasted this long carrying the future pirate king. What more could I ask? Luffy beamed at being called the future pirate king. It had become something of a running joke between them, Roger insisting that Luffy would take his title someday, and Luffy enthusiastically agreeing. Permission to come aboard? Whitebeard called, surprising many on both crews. It was rare for captains of their stature to board each other's vessels outside of all-out battle. Roger's eyes sparkled with interest. Granted. Bring your commanders if you wish, we have plenty of sake. As preparations were made for the meeting, Rayleigh pulled Roger aside one more time. What's he playing at? Whitebeard never makes social calls. That's exactly why it's interesting, Roger replied. Something's changed. I want to know what. Within minutes, a contingent from the Moby Dick had boarded the Oro Jackson. Whitebeard led the way, followed by several of his division commanders including a young Marco, already showing the confident bearing that would one day make him Whitebeard's right hand. But what caught everyone's attention was the dark-haired boy standing slightly behind Whitebeard, a youth not much older than Luffy, with fierce eyes and a defiant expression. Brought your own cabin boy, Edward? Roger asked with raised eyebrows. Whitebeard's laugh rumbled like distant thunder. This is Ace. He's been with us for about a year now. Thought he might want to meet your brat. Luffy immediately stepped forward, extending a hand toward the older boy. I'm Monkey D, Luffy. I'm gonna be king of the pirates someday. Ace glared at the offered hand, then at Luffy's face. There's only one pirate king, and he's not gonna be you. Well, not right now, Luffy agreed cheerfully, undeterred by the hostility. First it's Dad, but after that, it'll be me. Ace's scowl deepened at Luffy's casual reference to Roger as Dad. He looked like he wanted to say something cutting, but a warning glance from Whitebeard silenced him. Roger watched the interaction with interest before turning his attention to Whitebeard. Let's talk in my cabin. Rayleigh, make sure our guests are comfortable. As the two captains disappeared into Roger's quarters, Luffy continued trying to engage the standoffish Ace. How'd you join Whitebeard's crew? Did you eat a devil fruit too? Wanna see what I can do? Without waiting for answers, Luffy stretched his cheek out to an impossible length, grinning as Ace's eyes widened despite his attempt to look unimpressed. I'm a rubber man. I ate the Goma Goma no Mi. So what? Ace replied, crossing his arms. Lots of people have devil fruit powers. Do you? Luffy pressed, undiscouraged. None of your business, Ace muttered, though something flickered in his eyes, a hint of pride or excitement quickly suppressed. Marco, watching from nearby, smirked slightly. Go on, Ace. Show him. You've been dying to use it in a real fight anyway. Ace shot Marco an irritated look, but then a slow, challenging smile spread across his face. He turned to Luffy, holding up his fist, which suddenly burst into flames. Mera Mera no Mi, Ace said, a note of pride breaking through his tough exterior. I'm fire. Luffy's eyes bulged comically. Whoa. That's so cool. He reached out instinctively to touch the flames. Idiot. Ace pulled back his hand. You'll get burned. Oh, right, Luffy laughed, rubbing the back of his head. Forgot for a second. But still, fire. That's amazing. Ace seemed taken aback by Luffy's genuine enthusiasm. Yeah, I guess it's pretty cool. We should fight. Luffy declared suddenly. What? Ace's eyebrows shot up. Not for real, Luffy clarified. Just to practice. I've never fought a fire person before. Before Ace could respond, Rayleigh stepped in. No devil fruit battles on the ship. We're in the middle of the ocean, and I'm not fishing either of you out when you inevitably fall overboard. But Uncle Ray, Luffy started to protest. No buts, Rayleigh said firmly. Besides, I think you two would destroy half the ship before determining a winner. Marco chuckled. The old man would say the same thing. These two are walking disasters waiting to happen. I am not, both boys said simultaneously, then glared at each other. Rayleigh exchanged an amused glance with Marco. Perhaps when we reach the next island, if both captains approve. This seemed to satisfy Luffy, who immediately shifted to asking Ace questions about his adventures with Whitebeard's crew. Ace remained guarded, but gradually, Luffy's persistent friendliness began to wear down his defenses. By the time their captains emerged from Roger's cabin several hours later, Luffy and Ace were sitting cross-legged on the deck, engaged in an animated conversation about sea monsters they had encountered. Bigger than the whole ship. Luffy was saying, arms stretched wide to illustrate his point. That's nothing, Ace countered. We fought one in the New World that could swallow 3 ships at once. Roger and Whitebeard paused, observing their young charges with expressions that mixed amusement and something deeper, a shared understanding that passed unspoken between the two rivals. Looks like they're getting along, Roger commented. Whitebeard nodded, his eyes lingering on Ace. Some connections are faded, perhaps. Indeed, Roger agreed quietly. Thank you for bringing him, Edward. Whitebeard's expression remained unreadable. The boy deserved to see for himself. Roger glanced at his old rival sharply. Does he know? Not everything, Whitebeard replied. Some truths must be earned. Their cryptic exchange was interrupted when Luffy noticed them and jumped to his feet. Dad! Ace can control fire. It's the coolest thing ever. Can we go to an island so we can fight? Rayleigh said we can't do it on the ship because we might break stuff or fall in the water and drown, and that would be bad, but on an island it would be okay and, breathe, Luffy, Roger laughed, placing a hand on his son's shoulder to stem the torrent of words. Whitebeard turned to Ace, who had also stood but maintained a noticeable distance from Roger. What do you think, Ace? Up for a friendly match when we reach land? Ace's eyes darted between Whitebeard and Roger, a complex mix of emotions playing across his features. Sure, he finally said, voice carefully neutral. If he thinks he can handle it. Luffy grinned. I'll definitely win. You wish, Ace retorted, but there was less hostility in his voice now, replaced by the beginnings of friendly rivalry. The gathering began to break up as Whitebeard announced they would depart before nightfall. As the commanders prepared to return to their ship, Ace hesitated, then approached Roger directly while Luffy was distracted saying goodbye to Marco. Can I ask you something? Ace said, his voice low and intense. Roger nodded, sensing the importance of the moment. Of course. Ace seemed to struggle with his words before finally asking, is it true what they say? That the Pirate King knows what the One Piece really is? Roger studied the boy carefully before answering. I know many things, Ace. Some secrets are better discovered than given. That's not an answer, Ace challenged, frustration evident in his tone. Roger smiled, not unkindly. The best questions rarely have simple answers. When you're ready to find your own truth, the sea will guide you, just as it's guided me. Ace's face flushed with anger or disappointment, perhaps both. He turned away without another word, rejoining the Whitebeard commanders as they prepared to depart. Luffy bounded back to Roger's side as the visitors returned to their ship. Ace is amazing. He's so strong already, and he knows all about the new world. He says Whitebeard lets him fight real enemies sometimes. Does he now? Roger raised an eyebrow in Whitebeard's direction, receiving only a shrug in response. Can I fight real enemies too? Luffy asked eagerly. You already have, Roger reminded him. Or have you forgotten about Brutus and his crew? That was ages ago, Luffy complained. I'm way stronger now. Roger laughed, ruffling Luffy's hair. Patience, future Pirate King. Your battles will come soon enough. As Whitebeard and his crew departed, Roger watched Ace standing at the railing of the Moby Dick, the boy's eyes fixed on the Oro Jackson with an unreadable expression. Beside him, Luffy waved enthusiastically, already shouting about their promised fight next time. Interesting kid, Rayleigh commented, coming to stand beside Roger. There's something familiar about him. Yes, Roger agreed quietly. Very familiar. Rayleigh gave his captain a searching look. Something I should know. Roger shook his head slightly. Not yet. But soon, perhaps. He turned away from the railing. Set course for the nearest island. I think Luffy's earned his match. The promised battle between Luffy and Ace never materialized. 3 days after Whitebeard's visit, as they approached a small summer island, the Roger pirates found themselves surrounded by marine vessels that seemed to materialize from the early morning mist. Battle stations. Roger roared, instantly alert despite having been awakened from sleep. They've found us. Luffy tumbled from his hammock, pulling on his clothes as alarms rang throughout the ship. By the time he reached the deck, the situation was already grim. 6 marine battleships had formed a tight circle around the Oro Jackson, with a 7th, larger vessel hanging back, a vice admiral's flagship. How did they find us? Rayleigh shouted over the commotion of the crew preparing for battle. Roger's face was grim as he scanned the encircling ships. This isn't a random patrol. They knew exactly where we'd be. Cannons roared to life, and the sea erupted around them as the first volley from the marine ships narrowly missed the Oro Jackson. The pirate vessel returned fire immediately, her gunners already at their posts. Roger grabbed Luffy's arm as he rushed past. Stay close to me or Rayleigh. This is different from our usual skirmishes. Luffy nodded, serious for once. He could feel it too, the weight of the moment, the deliberate precision of the trap. A voice boomed across the water, amplified by a den mushi. Gold Roger. This is Vice Admiral Silas. Surrender the boy and yourself, and your crew will be spared. Roger's expression darkened. Silas. I should have known. Who's Silas? Luffy asked, squinting at the distant flagship. An old enemy, Roger replied grimly. One who doesn't know when to give up. He strode to the railing, grabbing a speaking trumpet. Silas. Still hiding behind your fleet, I see. Come and get us if you dare. The response was another barrage of cannon fire, this time striking the Oro Jackson directly. The ship shuddered under the impact, wood splintering as cannonballs tore through the hull. They're not aiming to sink us, Rayleigh realized aloud. They want to board. Roger nodded, drawing his sword. They want Luffy alive. And you? Rayleigh asked, though he already knew the answer. Dead will do just fine, Roger replied with a grim smile. Crocus. Status report below. The ship's doctor appeared from below decks, his expression grim. Taking on water in the lower hold, Captain. Pumps are working, but we need to seal the breaches. Scopper, take a team below. Roger ordered. Everyone else, prepare to repel boarders. The battle that followed was chaos incarnate. Marine soldiers swarmed the Oro Jackson from multiple directions, while cannon fire continued to pound the ship's hull. Roger fought like a demon, his blade flashing as he cut down soldier after soldier, but even Luffy could see he wasn't moving with his usual fluidity. Dad, you're bleeding. Luffy shouted, pointing to a dark stain spreading across Roger's shirt, not from a battle wound, but from within. It's nothing. Roger called back, downing another marine with a powerful strike. Stay focused. Luffy fought alongside his father, his rubber limbs stretching to deliver punches and kicks that sent marines flying. Years of training with Rayleigh had honed his natural abilities into genuine fighting skill, though he still lacked the finesse of a seasoned warrior. Gomu Gomu no pistol, he shouted, his fist shooting out to knock a marine officer overboard. Well done. Roger approved, before a sudden coughing fit doubled him over. Dad. Luffy moved toward him, but Roger straightened, wiping blood from his mouth. I said I'm fine. Keep fighting. A new voice cut through the chaos, cold, commanding, and filled with hatred. Gold Roger. At last. Vice Admiral Silas had boarded the Oro Jackson personally. He was tall and imposing, with a scarred face and gray hair cropped close to his skull. His white coat bore the insignia of marine justice, and the massive sword in his hand gleamed with deadly purpose. Silas, Roger acknowledged, stepping forward to place himself between the Vice Admiral and Luffy. Still holding that grudge, I see. It's not a grudge when it's justice, Silas replied coldly. His eyes found Luffy. So this is Dragon's son. The boy you've corrupted with your pirate ways. I haven't corrupted anyone, Roger said, his voice hardening. I've raised him to be free. Something your precious government wouldn't understand. Silas raised his sword. Surrender him now, Roger. The world government has plans for the boy. Plans? Roger's eyes narrowed dangerously. What plans? That's classified, Silas replied with a thin smile. But I assure you, his bloodline makes him very valuable. Dragon's son, raised by Gold Roger. The perfect bait. Bait? Rayleigh had appeared at Roger's side, his own blade drawn. For Dragon, you mean? Silas's smile widened fractionally. Among others. The government has many enemies who might emerge for such a prize. Roger's face flushed with anger. You're not taking him. I wasn't asking permission, Silas replied, and lunged forward with surprising speed. Roger met the attack head-on, his blade clashing against Silas's with a shower of sparks. The two men were evenly matched in skill, but it quickly became apparent that Roger was fighting at a disadvantage. His movements, while still faster than most could follow, lacked their usual precision. "You're not well, Roger," Silas observed during a momentary lull. "The great pirate king, brought low by illness. How fitting. I'm still strong enough to deal with you," Roger snarled, launching a fresh assault. Luffy tried to join the fight, but Rayleigh held him back. "This is your father's battle. We have our own problems." He was right. The Marines had the upper hand now, their numbers overwhelming the Roger pirates despite the crew's superior skill. The Oro Jackson was taking heavy damage, listing to one side as more cannon fire struck below the waterline. A massive explosion rocked the ship, throwing everyone off balance. One of the Marine vessels had moved in close, too close, and fired its entire broadside directly into the Oro Jackson's hull. "We're going down," someone shouted as the deck began to tilt ominously. In the confusion, Roger and Silas were separated by a collapsing mast. Rayleigh grabbed Luffy, pulling him toward the stern where several of the crew were preparing a lifeboat. "Wait. What about Dad?" Luffy struggled against Rayleigh's grip. "Your father can take care of himself," Rayleigh insisted, though doubt flickered in his eyes. "We need to get you off this ship." Another explosion ripped through the Oro Jackson, and suddenly the deck between Luffy and Roger was engulfed in flames. Through the fire, Luffy could see his father still battling Silas, both men bloodied but unbowed. "Dad!" Luffy screamed, stretching his arm toward Roger. Roger turned at the sound, his eyes finding Luffy across the burning deck. For a moment, father and son locked gazes, and Luffy saw something in Roger's eyes he'd never seen before. Fear. "Go with Rayleigh," Roger shouted. "I'll find you. I promise." Before Luffy could respond, Silas attacked again, forcing Roger back into their deadly duel. Rayleigh used Luffy's moment of distraction to haul him into the waiting lifeboat, where Scopper, Crocus, and 4 other crew members were already seated. "Lower it now," Rayleigh ordered, and the small craft dropped toward the churning sea. "No." Luffy fought desperately, but even his rubber strength couldn't break Rayleigh's iron grip. "We can't leave him." "We're not leaving him," Rayleigh said firmly. "We're following orders. Your father knows what he's doing." As their lifeboat hit the water, Luffy looked back at the burning wreck of the Oro Jackson. The proud ship that had been his home for most of his life was sinking rapidly, flames consuming what the sea hadn't claimed yet. Through the fire and smoke, he caught one last glimpse of Roger, still fighting, still standing, but surrounded by Marines. Then a wall of smoke obscured the view, and Scopper was rowing frantically to put distance between their small craft and the battle. Marine ships were focused on the Oro Jackson, giving them a chance to slip away unnoticed in the chaos. Luffy sat in numb shock as they made their escape, his eyes fixed on the distant inferno that had been his home. Around him, the crew was similarly subdued, the reality of their situation sinking in with each passing moment. "He'll make it," Luffy finally said, his voice small but determined. "Dad always makes it." Rayleigh placed a hand on his shoulder, saying nothing. His silence spoke volumes. "Where are we going?" Crocus asked after they'd put some distance between themselves and the naval battle. "There's an island about 10 miles south," Rayleigh replied. "Uninhabited, as far as I know. We'll regroup there and wait for the others." "If there are others," Scopper muttered grimly. "There will be," Rayleigh insisted. "The Roger pirates aren't finished yet." Luffy remained silent, watching the horizon where black smoke still marked the location of the battle. His father was back there, fighting for his life. Fighting for Luffy's freedom. And for the first time, Luffy truly understood what that freedom might cost. The island was little more than a forested rock jutting from the sea, with a small beach where they pulled their lifeboat ashore. By the time they arrived, night was falling, and there was no sign of other survivors from the Oro Jackson. Rayleigh organized their meager resources, a few weapons, some emergency rations, and basic medical supplies Crocus had managed to grab before abandonment. It wasn't much, but it would keep them alive for a few days. We need to establish a signal fire, Rayleigh decided. Something survivors can spot, but not so large it attracts marine attention. The crew set to work gathering wood and constructing a shelter from palm fronds. Luffy worked alongside them mechanically, his usual boundless energy replaced by quiet determination. "He's taking it hard," Crocus commented to Rayleigh as they watched Luffy dragging a massive tree trunk across the beach single-handedly. "Wouldn't you?" "Everything he's known just went up in flames," Rayleigh replied. "But he's stronger than he looks, inside, where it counts." Roger knew this day might come, Crocus said quietly. "He's been preparing the boy." "Not for this," Rayleigh shook his head. "No one can prepare for this." As night fell completely, they lit a small fire and huddled around it. The mood was somber as they ate their rationed food and contemplated their situation. "What happens if Dad doesn't come?" Luffy finally asked, his voice breaking the lengthy silence. All eyes turned to him, then to Rayleigh, who considered his answer carefully. "First, we wait," he said firmly. "A day, maybe two. If no one else arrives by then, we find a way to the next inhabited island and gather information. Roger has escaped worse situations before." "But he's sick," Luffy said bluntly. "Really sick. I've seen it getting worse." The crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. While most had suspected the captain's health was declining, Roger had done his best to hide the severity from all but his closest confidants. "Your father is the strongest man I've ever known," Rayleigh said. "In body and in spirit. Don't count him out yet." Luffy nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. If he doesn't come, we have to go after him, right?" "Luffy," Crocus began gently, "if the Marines have captured your father, then we break him out," Luffy interrupted, a spark of his usual determination flaring. "We can't just leave him." "It's not that simple," Scopper interjected. "Impel down is, I don't care how hard it is." Luffy's voice rose, echoing across the beach. "Dad would never abandon any of us. Never." Rayleigh placed a firm hand on Luffy's shoulder. "You're right. We don't abandon our own. But we also don't rush into battles we can't win. If, and I stress if, your father has been captured, we need to be smart about how we respond." Luffy's shoulders slumped slightly. "I know. I need to do something." "Right now, the best thing you can do is rest," Rayleigh said gently. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out our next move." With reluctance, Luffy retreated to the makeshift shelter they'd constructed. Though he lay down as instructed, sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his father surrounded by Marines, fighting despite the blood staining his shirt from within. Hours passed, and the camp grew quiet as the others succumbed to exhaustion. Only Rayleigh remained awake, keeping watch by the dying fire. Silently, Luffy slipped from the shelter and joined him. "You should be sleeping," Rayleigh said without turning. "Can't," Luffy replied simply, sitting beside his mentor. "Thinking too much." Rayleigh nodded in understanding. "A rare ailment for you." That drew a small smile from Luffy, though it quickly faded. "Uncle Ray, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Dad was gonna tell me about the One Piece soon, wasn't he?" "Because of his sickness." Rayleigh's eyebrows rose in surprise. "What makes you think that?" "I heard him talking to Crocus. About making sure I was ready. About things I needed to know before." Luffy trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Rayleigh sighed deeply. "Your father has always believed that some truths must be earned, not given. The One Piece is complicated. But he found it, right? He's been there." "Yes," Rayleigh confirmed. "We've been to Laugh Tale. We've seen what waits at the end of the Grand Line. Luffy leaned forward eagerly. So what is it? What's the One Piece? Rayleigh shook his head. That's not my secret to share, Luffy. If Roger wanted you to know now, he would have told you himself. Luffy's face fell, but he nodded in acceptance. Then I'll just have to find it myself someday. Like Dad did. I believe you will, Rayleigh said with quiet conviction. You have your father's determination, and his luck. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead. Finally, Luffy spoke again, his voice small in the darkness. I'm scared, Uncle Ray. Not of fighting or dying or anything like that. I'm scared of not being enough. If Dad doesn't come back, how am I supposed to? To what? Fill his shoes? Rayleigh finished for him. You're not. You never were. Seeing Luffy's hurt expression, Rayleigh continued quickly. Roger doesn't want you to be him, Luffy. He wants you to be you, with your own dreams, your own journey, your own legend. But everyone always expects, forget what everyone expects, Rayleigh interrupted firmly. What do you want? Luffy considered this for a long moment. I want to be free. Really free. To have adventures, make friends, see everything the world has to offer. A small smile tugged at his lips. And yeah, I want to find the One Piece and be Pirate King too. But, my way. Then that's what you'll do, Rayleigh said simply. With or without Roger beside you. That's the greatest gift he's given you, not his name or his legacy, but the courage to follow your own path. Luffy nodded slowly, absorbing the wisdom in Rayleigh's words. As they lapsed back into silence, a flicker of movement on the horizon caught his attention. Uncle Ray, look. Luffy jumped to his feet, pointing out to sea. A ship. Rayleigh was instantly alert, hand moving to his sword. Marine or pirate? Luffy squinted, then broke into a wide grin. Neither. It's a lifeboat. More survivors. He was right. As the small craft drew closer, they could make out 3 figures rowing steadily toward the island. Luffy's rubber arms stretched out impossibly long, reaching across the water to grab the boat's prow and pull it faster toward shore. The arriving crew members, Mira, Seagull, and Taro, were exhausted but alive, with only minor injuries. They had escaped the Oro Jackson on the opposite side from Rayleigh's group, managing to avoid marine detection. What news of the captain? Rayleigh asked immediately. The 3 exchanged grim glances before Mira spoke. Last we saw, he was still fighting Silas. The Oro Jackson was nearly submerged, flames everywhere. She hesitated. There was an explosion, bigger than the others. We couldn't see after that. But you didn't see him captured? Luffy pressed urgently. No, Seagull confirmed. But we didn't see him escape either, kid. I'm sorry. Luffy's face fell, but he rallied quickly. Then we keep waiting. Dad's the strongest there is. He'll make it. The night passed slowly, with more survivors arriving in 2s and 3s. By dawn, 16 of the Roger pirates had reunited on the small island, less than half their total crew, but more than Rayleigh had dared hope for. Still, there was no sign of Roger. As the sun climbed higher, Rayleigh called a council. We can't stay here indefinitely. Supplies are limited, and this island is too exposed. What's the nearest friendly port? Scopper asked. Water 7 is about a week's journey by small craft, Mira suggested. We have contacts there. Too obvious, Rayleigh countered. That's the first place Marines will watch for survivors. The discussion continued, with various options proposed and rejected. Throughout it all, Luffy remained unnaturally quiet, staring out to sea as if willpower alone could make his father's ship appear on the horizon. It was nearing midday when he suddenly leapt to his feet. Ship. Coming fast. All conversation ceased as the pirates scrambled for weapons and vantage points. The approaching vessel was larger than a lifeboat, a small but swift sloop cutting through the waves with purpose. "Marine colors," someone shouted. "No, wait," Luffy countered, his vision sharper than most. "It's Shanks. It's Shanks's flag." Sure enough, as the ship drew closer, they could make out the distinctive emblem of the red-haired pirates, a relatively new but quickly rising crew in the Grand Line. How did he know to find us here? Crocus wondered aloud. Roger, Rayleigh realized. He must have contacted Shanks somehow. The sloop reached the island in record time, with Shanks himself visible at the helm. The red-haired pirate looked grim as he brought the vessel alongside their makeshift camp. "Rayleigh. Luffy," he called as he leapt ashore. "Thank the seas you're alive." Luffy ran to him, hope blazing in his eyes. "Shanks. Is Dad with you? Did you find him?" Shanks's expression told the story before his words could. "I'm sorry, Luffy. We intercepted a marine transmission about the battle. Came as fast as we could, but..." "But what?" Luffy demanded, grabbing Shanks's shirt. "What happened to Dad?" Shanks placed his hands gently on Luffy's shoulders. "The Marines are saying they've captured Gold Roger. They're transporting him to Marine headquarters as we speak." A collective gasp went up from the gathered pirates. Capturing the Pirate King, it seemed impossible, yet. "Then we go after him," Luffy declared, looking around at the crew. "Right now." "It's not that simple, Luffy," Shanks said gently. "They'll be expecting rescue attempts. The security will be unprecedented." "I don't care." Luffy's voice cracked with emotion. "We can't just leave him." "We won't," Rayleigh said firmly. "But Shanks is right, we need to be smart about this." He turned to the red-haired pirate. "What else do you know?" Shanks's expression darkened further. "There's more, and it's complicated. We should talk privately." "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of everyone," Luffy insisted. "We're all Dad's crew." Shanks exchanged a look with Rayleigh, who nodded slightly. "All right, Luffy. The truth is, according to our sources, Roger surrendered." "What? No way." Luffy shook his head violently. "Dad would never give up." "Not give up," Shanks clarified carefully. "Surrender. There's a difference. The reports say that after the Oro Jackson was destroyed, after most of you had escaped, he laid down his sword and allowed himself to be taken." "That makes no sense," Scopper growled. "Roger would die fighting before surrendering to Marines. Unless," Crocus said slowly, realization dawning on his face, "he had a reason." All eyes turned to the doctor, who continued reluctantly, "His illness. It's progressing faster than we anticipated. Perhaps he felt he had no choice." "No," Rayleigh shook his head. "Roger wouldn't surrender just because of illness. He'd rather die in battle." His eyes narrowed in thought. "Unless." "Unless what?" Luffy pressed. "Unless he's planning something," Rayleigh finished. "Something that requires him to be captured." A heavy silence fell over the group as they contemplated this possibility. Roger was known for his audacious plans, his seemingly reckless strategies that somehow always worked out in the end. "Whatever he's planning," Shanks finally said, "he made contact with me 3 days ago. Asked me to be near these coordinates, ready to evacuate survivors." He looked directly at Luffy. "And he asked me specifically to make sure you were safe." "Me? Why just me?" Luffy demanded. "Because you're the most important thing in the world to him," Shanks said simply. "More important than treasure, than his title, than his own freedom." Tears welled in Luffy's eyes, but he blinked them back fiercely. "So what do we do now?" Rayleigh stepped forward, assuming command naturally in Roger's absence. "First, we leave this island." Shanks's ship can take us somewhere safer while we gather information and assess the situation. And then we rescue Dad, Luffy stated firmly. And then, Rayleigh said carefully, we determine what Roger actually wants us to do. If he surrendered deliberately, he has a plan. Our job is to figure out what it is and how we fit into it. Luffy clearly wanted to argue, but even he could see the wisdom in Rayleigh's words. Reluctantly, he nodded. As the crew gathered their meager possessions and prepared to board Shanks's sloop, Luffy took one last look at the horizon, at the empty sea where the Oro Jackson would never sail again. I'm coming for you, Dad, he whispered. Just hold on. The Red Hair pirates had established a temporary base on a remote island several days' journey from where the Oro Jackson had been destroyed. It was a well-hidden cove on an otherwise uninhabited landmass, ideal for a crew wanting to stay off the marine radar. Shanks's first mate, Ben Beckman, had coordinated an impressive intelligence network in the days since Roger's capture. News clippings, marine reports, and information from various underworld sources plastered the walls of their makeshift command center. The world government is making no secret of the capture, Beckman explained to the assembled Roger pirates. They're trumpeting it across the Grand Line as the end of an era. Propaganda, Rayleigh dismissed. Roger's been captured before. Not like this, Beckman countered, pointing to a particular report. They're planning something unprecedented. A public execution. Shocked murmurs rippled through the gathering. Public executions for pirates weren't unusual, but for someone of Roger's stature, the normal protocol would be a quiet, secure disposal at Impel Down or Marine headquarters. When? Crocus asked grimly. 2 weeks from now. In Logue Town. Beckman tapped the location on a map. They're making a spectacle of it, inviting press, arranging special viewing areas. It's to be a demonstration of government power. And Dad's just allowing this? Luffy asked incredulously. He had been uncharacteristically subdued since their rescue, processing the reality of his father's capture in his own way. That's the strangest part, Shanks admitted. According to our sources, he's been completely cooperative. No escape attempts, no resistance. He's even refused legal counsel. Because he's planning something, Rayleigh insisted. This is Roger we're talking about. He's always 3 steps ahead. Or, Crocus said quietly, because he knows his time is limited anyway. The room fell silent at this uncomfortable possibility. Everyone present knew of Roger's declining health, though few understood how serious it had become. No, Luffy said suddenly, his voice firm. Uncle Ray is right. Dad has a plan. And we need to figure out what it is. How? Scopper asked. It's not like we can just walk in and ask him. Luffy's eyes lit up. Maybe we can. Not all of us, but, what if I went? They don't know what I look like, right? Absolutely not, Rayleigh vetoed immediately. It's far too dangerous. But I could disguise myself. Just to talk to Dad, find out what he wants us to do. Luffy, Shanks said gently, the Marines may not have photos of you, but they know Roger was raising Dragon's son. A boy your age approaching Roger in custody would raise immediate suspicion. Luffy's face fell, but the determined glint in his eyes didn't fade entirely. Rayleigh recognized that look, it was pure Roger, the expression he wore when he was contemplating something audacious that no sane person would attempt. We need to consider all possibilities, Rayleigh said, redirecting the discussion. Including the possibility that Roger doesn't want to be rescued. What? Luffy's head snapped up. That's crazy. Is it? Rayleigh challenged. Think about it. If Roger wanted to escape Marine custody, he could. No matter how tight their security, no matter how many guards or sea stone shackles. If he truly wanted out, he'd find a way. Then why isn't he? Mira asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Because whatever he's planning requires him to stay exactly where he is, Rayleigh concluded. At least for now. The discussion continued late into the night, with various theories proposed and debated. Some believed Roger had hidden a message for them somewhere, others thought he was using his capture to lure out a specific enemy. Luffy participated actively, his quick mind proposing solutions that the adults might have overlooked. By morning, they had formulated a plan, or rather, several contingency plans depending on what information their scouts could gather in the coming days. Shanks approached Luffy as the meeting broke up. "You should get some rest. You've barely slept since we found you." "I'm fine," Luffy insisted, though the dark circles under his eyes suggested otherwise. "Your father wouldn't want you driving yourself into the ground," Shanks pressed. "Even Roger slept sometimes, you know." Luffy managed a small smile at that. "Only when Rayleigh forced him to." "Exactly. And now I'm doing the forcing." Shanks guided him toward the small tent that had been set up for him. "Sleep. We have work to do tomorrow." Reluctantly, Luffy retreated to his tent. But sleep, when it finally came, brought no peace, only dreams of fire and sinking ships and his father's face disappearing behind walls of smoke. He awoke with a start several hours later, heart pounding. Outside, the camp was quiet, most of the pirates having retired for the night. A small fire still burned in the center clearing, with a single figure sitting beside it. Slipping from his tent, Luffy made his way to the fire. Crocus looked up as he approached, offering a tired smile. "Couldn't sleep?" the doctor asked. Luffy shook his head, sitting cross-legged on the ground. For a while, they watched the flames in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. "How sick is he really?" Luffy finally asked. "Dad, I mean." Crocus sighed heavily. "He made me promise not to tell you the details." "I'm not asking for details. Just, how long? If he wasn't captured, if everything was normal, how long would he have?" The doctor considered his answer carefully. "Not long. Months, perhaps. His condition has been deteriorating faster than we anticipated." Luffy absorbed this with surprising calmness. "That's why he's letting them execute him, isn't it? He's dying anyway." "I believe that's part of it," Crocus admitted. "But knowing your father, there's more to the story. Roger never does anything for just one reason." "He's protecting me," Luffy said with sudden certainty. "That's why he surrendered. Silas said they wanted to use me as bait, so Dad made himself the bait instead." Crocus nodded slowly. "That sounds like Roger. But I don't need protecting." Luffy protested. "I can fight. I'm strong." "It's not about strength, Luffy. It's about time." Crocus gestured vaguely to the starry sky. "Roger's time is ending, he's accepted that. But yours is just beginning. Everything he's done, everything he's taught you, has been to prepare you for your own journey." "But I don't want my journey to start like this," Luffy said quietly. "Not with Dad dying in front of the whole world." "I don't think any of us get to choose how our stories begin or end," Crocus replied. "We only get to choose what we do with the chapters in between." Luffy pondered this wisdom, staring into the flames. "So what do I do now? Just let him die?" "I can't answer that for you. But I can tell you what Roger would say." Crocus adopted a gruff voice that was a surprisingly good imitation of the Pirate King. "Follow your heart, boy. It knows the way even when your head is lost at sea." Luffy laughed despite himself. "That does sound like him. Roger has always believed in you, in your instincts, in your potential, in the man you'll become. Whatever you decide to do, trust in that belief." Nodding slowly, Luffy rose to his feet. "Thanks, Crocus. I think I know what I need to do now." The doctor watched him return to his tent, a mixture of concern and pride in his eyes. Whatever Luffy had decided, Crocus had no doubt it would be as unpredictable and audacious as Roger himself would have chosen. The boy truly was his father's son, not by blood, but by something far more powerful, shared spirit. The next morning brought unexpected news. Beckman burst into the command tent where Rayleigh, Shanks, and the senior Roger pirates were discussing strategies. "You need to see this," he said urgently, spreading a fresh newspaper on the table. The headline was enormous, impossible to miss: Pirate King Gold Roger execution date set, 3 days hence in Logtown Square. 3 days? Rayleigh's eyes widened. They've moved it up. Why? Security concerns, according to this. Beckman tapped the article. Too many pirate crews gathering in the East Blue. They're afraid of a mass rescue attempt. Smart move, Shanks admitted grudgingly. Less time for anyone to organize. Rayleigh scanned the article quickly. They're still making it public, though. Inviting the world to witness the end of the Pirate King. Where's Luffy? Crocus suddenly asked, looking around the tent. He should hear this. A quick search of the camp revealed what Rayleigh had already begun to suspect: Luffy was gone. So was one of the smaller boats, a bag of provisions, and, most telling, the eternal pose to Logtown. That reckless, stubborn, impossible boy. Rayleigh exploded when the evidence was clear. He's going after Roger himself. He must have overheard our plans yesterday, Shanks reasoned. Decided we were moving too cautiously. He'll get himself captured or killed. Scopper growled. Not necessarily, Rayleigh said, his initial anger giving way to thoughtful consideration. Luffy may be young, but he's not stupid. And he's been trained by the best pirates on the sea. You sound almost proud, Shanks observed. I am, Rayleigh admitted. Worried sick, but proud. It's exactly what Roger would have done at his age. So what now? Crocus asked. Do we go after him? Rayleigh studied the map of Logtown spread across the table. We stick to our original plan, but accelerate the timeline. Shanks, can your ship reach Logtown in 2 days? With favorable winds, yes. Then we sail immediately. Whether Luffy succeeds or fails in whatever he's planning, he'll need backup. As the camp burst into activity, preparing for immediate departure, Rayleigh stepped outside, gazing in the direction of Logtown. Somewhere out there, a 12-year-old boy was sailing alone toward the most heavily guarded location in the East Blue, determined to save his father or die trying. Just like his damn father, Rayleigh muttered, but there was as much affection as exasperation in his voice. Luffy had never sailed alone before, but years at sea had taught him the basics. The small sailboat he'd borrowed from Shanks's camp was manageable for a single person, especially one with stretching rubber limbs that could adjust multiple controls simultaneously. The eternal pose to Logtown pointed unwavering in his direction, guiding him across the relatively calm waters of the East Blue. He'd chosen his moment well, slipping away during the pre-dawn watch change when attention was most likely to lapse. I'm coming, Dad, he murmured, adjusting the sail to catch a favorable wind. Just hang on a little longer. He had no concrete plan beyond reaching Logtown, finding his father, and, well, that part was still fuzzy. But Luffy had never been one for elaborate strategies. He preferred to assess situations as they developed and trust his instincts. Right now, those instincts were screaming that he needed to reach Roger before the execution. Not necessarily to rescue him, Luffy had reluctantly accepted that might not be possible, but at least to speak with him one more time. The journey was remarkably uneventful. Good weather held, and the small boat made steady progress. Luffy pushed himself to sail through the night, catching only brief snatches of sleep when the waters were particularly calm. By dawn of the third day, execution day, the silhouette of Logtown appeared on the horizon. Luffy adjusted his course, aiming for a small cove north of the main harbor that Roger had once pointed out during a previous visit. Always have a back door, Luffy, his father had advised. Especially when entering a place where pirates might not be welcome. As he approached the cove, Luffy was alarmed to see dozens of ships already anchored in and around Logtown's main harbor. It seemed the entire world had come to witness the Pirate King's execution. Securing his boat in a hidden cove, Luffy donned his disguise, a simple hooded cloak over his regular clothes, with his precious straw hat concealed beneath. The hat was too recognizable, a gift from Shanks that too many people associated with the Roger Pirates now. Logue Town was packed with visitors. Marines patrolled in force, but they were clearly overwhelmed by the sheer number of people flooding the streets. Luffy kept his head down, blending with the crowds making their way toward the town square where a large execution platform had been erected. Whispers and excited chatter surrounded him, heard they're bringing him through the main street first, chance to see the Pirate King up close, wonder if he'll beg for mercy at the end. Luffy gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to lash out at that last comment. Anyone who thought Gold Roger would beg for anything didn't know the first thing about his father. The town square was already filling with spectators when Luffy arrived. He wormed his way through the crowd, using his small size to advantage, aiming for a position close to the execution platform. Security was tight around the immediate vicinity of the platform. Marines stood at attention, creating a perimeter that no one could cross. Behind them, in a roped-off section, were what appeared to be world government officials and other VIPs who had secured special viewing positions. Luffy managed to reach the front of the general crowd, separated from the platform by only the Marine cordon and the VIP section. From here, he would have a clear view of the execution, though the thought made his stomach churn. How am I going to reach him? He muttered to himself, scanning the area for weaknesses in the security. Before he could formulate any plan, a commotion rippled through the crowd. The Marine lines parted to create a pathway from the main street to the execution platform. A moment later, a procession appeared. Led by Vice Admiral Silas himself, a contingent of elite Marines escorted a single prisoner toward the platform. Despite the sea stone shackles binding his wrists and ankles, despite the days in Marine custody, Gold Roger walked with head high and shoulders squared. His signature mustache and coat were unmistakable, though his hat was conspicuously absent. The crowd's reaction was immediate and overwhelming, a mixture of jeers, cheers, and stunned silence. The Pirate King, the man whose name had terrorized the seas for decades, now walked calmly to his death. Luffy froze, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure everyone around him must hear it. His father was mere yards away, close enough to call out to, but surrounded by the most elite Marines in the government's arsenal. As if sensing his son's presence, Roger's eyes suddenly swept across the crowd. For the briefest moment, father and son locked gazes, and Roger smiled. Not his usual boisterous grin, but something smaller, more private. A message meant for Luffy alone. Then the moment was gone, and Roger was ascending the steps to the execution platform, Marines flanking him on either side. Luffy's mind raced. That smile, it hadn't been resignation or defeat. It had been reassurance. Whatever was happening, Roger was at peace with it. Silas stepped forward, unrolling an official-looking document. The crowd quieted as he began to read the formal charges against the Pirate King, a list so long it seemed it might never end. Piracy, murder, theft, destruction of government property, inciting rebellion, the litany continued until it became almost meaningless in its repetition. Throughout it all, Roger stood tall, his expression one of almost amused tolerance. When Silas finally finished reading the charges, he turned to the prisoner. Gold Roger, have you any last words before sentence is carried out? A hush fell over the square. Even the birds seemed to stop singing as the world waited for the Pirate King's final statement. Roger looked out over the crowd, his gaze sweeping across the sea of faces, some hateful, some admiring, all captivated. When he spoke, his voice carried effortlessly across the square, strong and clear, my treasure. If you want it, you can have it. Find it. I left all the world has there. The crowd erupted in confused murmurs that quickly grew to excited shouts. What treasure? Where had he left it? Was the legendary One Piece real after all? Silas tried to restore order, but Roger wasn't finished. His eyes found Luffy once more in the crowd, and though his next words were ostensibly for everyone, Luffy knew they were meant primarily for him: wealth, fame, power. Gold, Roger, the Pirate King, attained everything this world has to offer. But the greatest treasure isn't gold or jewels, it's freedom. The freedom to live life on your own terms, to chase your dreams beyond the horizon. That's the treasure I cherished most. Tears welled in Luffy's eyes as he understood the message hidden within the grand declaration. His father was telling him, and the world, what truly mattered. Not the title of Pirate King, not even the One Piece itself, but the freedom to pursue one's own path. The executioners took position beside Roger, their spears gleaming in the sunlight. Silas raised his hand, preparing to give the signal. In that moment, Luffy made his decision. He wouldn't try to save Roger, not because he couldn't, but because Roger didn't want to be saved. This was his father's final adventure, his last act of defiance against a world that had tried and failed to contain him. Instead of lunging forward or shouting out, Luffy straightened to his full height. He threw back his hood and placed Shanks's straw hat firmly on his head, visible for anyone who knew to look. "I see you, Dad," he shouted, his voice somehow cutting through the crowd's noise. "I'll be free. I promise." Roger's eyes found him one last time, and the Pirate King's face split into a genuine smile, proud, fierce, and full of love. He nodded once, a gesture of approval and farewell. Silas's hand fell, and the executioners moved with practiced precision. In his final moment, as the spears descended, Roger didn't close his eyes. He kept them fixed on the horizon, on the endless sea that had been his home, and on the boy with the straw hat who would carry his legacy forward. Then it was done. The Pirate King was dead. But instead of shock or horror, Roger's face remained frozen in that last, defiant smile. He died as he had lived, on his own terms, without fear or regret. The crowd's reaction was chaos. Some cheered, some wept, many simply stood in stunned silence. But a significant number seemed inspired by Roger's final words, their faces lighting with the dawning realization that the greatest treasure in history might be there for the taking. Luffy didn't stay to witness the aftermath. As soon as the execution was complete, he pulled his hood back up and slipped away through the crowd, moving against the tide of people still pressing toward the square. Tears streamed down his face, but his steps were steady, his path clear. His father was gone, but his father's dream, the dream of absolute freedom, lived on in him. As he reached the edge of town, Luffy paused, looking back at the distant execution platform where his father's body still hung. "Goodbye, Dad," he whispered. "I'll make you proud. I'll be the freest person on the sea. I promise." Then he turned and ran toward the hidden cove where his boat waited, unaware that his father's execution had just ignited a new era of piracy that would reshape the world. The great pirate era had begun, and Monkey D. Luffy, son of the revolutionary dragon, raised by the Pirate King himself, would soon make his own mark upon it. Chapter 3, A New Dawn. 3 years had passed since that fateful day in Logue Town. The world had changed dramatically, the great pirate era exploding across the seas as thousands of fortune-seekers took Roger's final words as an invitation to adventure. But for Luffy, time had moved differently, marked less by global events and more by personal growth. "Higher, Luffy. You're still telegraphing that kick," Rayleigh shouted from across the training ground. At 15, Luffy had grown several inches, his lanky frame beginning to show the promise of the man he would become. Sweat poured down his face as he spun, legs stretching impossibly to deliver a Gomu Gomu no whip toward a wooden training dummy. The attack connected with enough force to splinter the wood, sending the dummy's head flying into the underbrush. "Better," Rayleigh acknowledged with a nod. "But still too slow on the recovery. In a real fight, I'd be vulnerable during the snapback," Luffy finished, having heard this particular criticism countless times. I know. They were training on a remote island in the East Blue, one of several temporary homes Luffy had known since Roger's execution. Rayleigh had taken primary responsibility for the boy's education, both in combat and in the ways of the world, fulfilling a promise made to Roger years before. Again, Rayleigh ordered, setting up another dummy. This time, maintain your balance throughout the entire technique. Luffy adjusted his straw hat, a bit weathered now but still his most prized possession, and reset his stance. As he prepared to attack, his mind drifted briefly to the last conversation he'd had with Roger about his rubber abilities. The key to mastering any devil fruit, Roger had explained during one of their final training sessions together, isn't just understanding what it can do, but what it wants to do. They had been sitting on the deck of a small ship, not the Oro Jackson, which had already been lost by then, but a temporary vessel Shanks had provided during their last months together. Roger's illness had progressed significantly, his once robust frame noticeably thinner, but his eyes remained as sharp and alive as ever. "What do you mean, what it wants to do?" Luffy had asked, flexing his rubber fingers experimentally. Roger grinned, that familiar spark of mischief dancing in his eyes despite his condition. "Devil fruits aren't just tools, Luffy. They're almost like personalities. The Gomu Gomu no Mi wants to stretch, to expand, to reach beyond normal limits. It has feelings." Luffy's face scrunched in confusion. "Not feelings exactly," Roger laughed. "But nature. Purpose. The most successful devil fruit users are those who work with their fruit's nature, not against it." He poked Luffy's rubber arm. "You're trying too hard to make your body behave like normal flesh. Stop fighting what you are." "But if I just let myself be all rubbery all the time, I'd be bouncing around like crazy." "There's a middle ground," Roger advised. "Don't fight the rubber, guide it. Your fruit wants to stretch and rebound, so use that momentum, that natural energy. Let it flow through you rather than forcing it to obey." Luffy had frowned in concentration, looking down at his hands. "I'm not sure I understand." "You will," Roger promised. "One day, it'll just click. And when it does," he snapped his fingers, "you'll wonder how you ever struggled with it at all." "Focus, Luffy." Rayleigh's sharp voice cut through the memory, jerking him back to the present. "Your mind's wandering again." "Sorry, Uncle Ray," Luffy apologized, resetting his stance. "Just thinking about something Dad told me." Rayleigh's expression softened slightly at the mention of Roger. Even 3 years later, the loss of his oldest friend and captain remained a raw wound. "What did he tell you?" "Something about not fighting against my devil fruit. About letting it flow instead of forcing it." Luffy stretched his arm experimentally, watching how it naturally wanted to recoil. "I never really understood what he meant." Rayleigh stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Roger always had his own way of explaining things. But there's wisdom there. Try this, instead of thinking about stretching your limbs, think about extending your reach. The rubber is just the means, not the action itself." Luffy tilted his head, considering this. "My reach, not my rubber." He closed his eyes, focusing not on the stretchiness of his body but on what that ability allowed him to do, to reach places others couldn't, to connect with what was distant, to extend his influence beyond normal boundaries. When his eyes opened, there was a new quality to his movement as he launched into the attack again. His leg didn't just stretch, it flowed outward, maintaining a connection to his center of gravity even at its furthest extension. When it snapped back, instead of throwing him off balance, the momentum carried naturally through his body. The dummy didn't just lose its head this time, it shattered completely. Rayleigh's eyebrows rose in appreciation. Now that was different. Luffy stared at his leg in surprise. It felt different. Like I wasn't stretching rubber but extending myself. A huge grin split his face. Dad was right. It clicked. Roger usually was right, Rayleigh said with a small smile. Eventually. He clapped his hands once. That's enough physical training for today. Let's work on your observation hockey. Luffy groaned dramatically. But we just had a breakthrough. I want to try more rubber attacks. And you will, after hockey practice. Roger made me promise you'd be proficient in all 3 types by your 17th birthday. We have work to do. Fine, Luffy grumbled, though without real annoyance. He understood the importance of hockey. Roger had emphasized it constantly during his final months. As they moved to a different part of the training ground, Luffy's thoughts returned to those last months with his father. So much knowledge Roger had tried to impart, so many places he had insisted they visit together before the end. This is Reverse Mountain, Roger had said, pointing to the massive landform where all 4 blues met the Grand Line. They had sailed as close as possible in their small vessel, close enough to see the powerful currents that flowed miraculously upward against gravity. I know, Luffy had replied with a hint of impatience. We passed through it when I was little. On the Oro Jackson. Roger had shaken his head. You saw it, but you didn't see it. Look again, Luffy. Really look. Somewhat confused, Luffy had squinted at the mountain and the treacherous waters surrounding it. It's big? And the water goes up instead of down. It's a gateway, Roger had said softly. The only proper entrance to the Grand Line for a true pirate. It separates the dreamers from the doers. He'd turned to Luffy, suddenly serious. When you begin your own journey, start here. Enter the Grand Line as I did, as all true seekers of the One Piece must. No shortcuts. But we could just sail in from the calm belt, no shortcuts, Roger had repeated firmly. The journey matters as much as the destination, Luffy. Each challenge you face, each island you discover, each friend and enemy you make along the way, they're all part of what it means to be Pirate King. Luffy had nodded, not fully understanding then but committing the words to memory anyway. Roger had been like that in those final months, sometimes cryptic, often philosophical, always insistent that certain traditions and paths be respected. They had visited other significant locations too, Sabaody Archipelago, where Roger showed him the coding mechanics for ships heading to Fishman Island, Water 7, where he introduced Luffy to some of the world's best shipwrights, even a brief, secretive trip to Skypiea, though Roger had been very weak by then. The One Piece is real, Luffy, Roger had told him during that final voyage, as they sat watching the sunset from their small ship's deck. But it's not what most pirates think. What is it then? Luffy had asked eagerly. It was the closest Roger had ever come to discussing the legendary treasure directly. Roger had smiled mysteriously. Something that changed how I see the world. Something that will change you too, when you're ready to find it. But where is it? At Laugh Tale, right? Can't you just tell me how to get there? I could, Roger had acknowledged. But I won't. Why not? Luffy had demanded, frustrated. Don't you trust me? With my life, Roger had replied without hesitation. But this isn't about trust, Luffy. It's about experience. The journey to Laugh Tale is as important as what waits at the end. If I gave you a map, an eternal pose, exact coordinates, you'd miss everything that matters. But, no buts, Roger had interrupted gently but firmly. I found my way there. You'll find yours. Luffy. Rayleigh's exasperated voice pulled him from the memory. Your concentration is atrocious today. Focus on the hockey exercise. Sorry, Luffy muttered, closing his eyes again to focus on sensing the presence of small creatures Rayleigh had hidden throughout the training area. But even as he extended his senses outward, feeling for the unique signatures of life around him, his mind kept returning to those final journeys with Roger. At the time, he'd been frustrated by his father's cryptic teachings and refusal to simply hand over the secrets of the Grand Line and the One Piece. Now, 3 years later, he was beginning to understand. Roger hadn't been withholding information out of stubbornness or some misguided sense of tradition. He'd been ensuring that Luffy would have his own adventure, his own discoveries, his own legend. I sent 17, no, 18 creatures, Luffy said, eyes still closed. Mostly small, rodents and birds. But there's something bigger behind that rock to the east. A wildcat, I think. Rayleigh nodded approvingly. Better. Your range is improving. Now, try to focus only on the birds. As Luffy refined his concentration, filtering out the non-avian signatures, a familiar presence approached the training ground. He smiled without opening his eyes. Shanks is back. Rayleigh turned toward the path leading from the beach, where the red-haired pirate was indeed approaching, his signature straw hat noticeably absent since gifting it to Luffy years before. Your observation is getting sharper, Shanks called out with a grin. Recognized me from half a mile away, didn't you? Your hockey's too loud, Luffy complained good-naturedly, opening his eyes. Like a foghorn in my head. Shanks laughed, clapping Rayleigh on the shoulder in greeting before turning back to Luffy. That foghorn might save your life someday. Being able to identify specific people by their hockey signature is a rare skill. How was your voyage? Rayleigh asked, signaling a break in their training session. Productive, Shanks replied, his expression turning more serious. The Red Force encountered one of Whitebeard's allied ships. Got some interesting news. Luffy perked up immediately. About Ace? Shanks nodded. He's made quite a name for himself. They're calling him Fire Fist Ace now. Apparently, he's been offered a position as one of Whitebeard's division commanders. Wow! Luffy exclaimed, genuinely impressed. That's amazing. I knew he was strong, but to become a commander already. He's a few years older than you, Rayleigh reminded him. And he's been active as a pirate longer. Still, Luffy insisted, it's impressive. I can't wait to see him again. You might get your chance sooner than you think, Shanks said. But that's not the only news I have. He glanced at Rayleigh. Some of it's less pleasant. Rayleigh's expression darkened. Silas? Shanks nodded grimly. He's been promoted to admiral. And he's making it his personal mission to track down any remaining Roger pirates, especially Luffy. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees at the mention of Vice Admiral, now Admiral, Silas. The man had become an almost mythical enemy to Luffy over the years, the Marine who had captured his father, who had somehow known precisely where to find the Oro Jackson that fateful day, who had specifically targeted Luffy as valuable. Let him come, Luffy said, his voice hardening in a way that made him suddenly sound much older than his 15 years. I'm not afraid of him. You should be, Rayleigh said bluntly. Silas is dangerous, Luffy. Not just because of his strength, but because of his obsession. He believes destroying Roger's legacy is his divine mission, and to him, you're the living embodiment of that legacy. But I've gotten stronger. No, Shanks interrupted firmly. You're not ready to face someone of admiral rank. Not yet. Luffy bristled. I'm not weak. I've been training non-stop for 3 years. And you've made remarkable progress, Rayleigh acknowledged. But admirals are in a different category altogether. Even your father at his peak would approach such battles with caution. Then what am I supposed to do? Keep hiding forever? Rayleigh and Shanks exchanged glances before Shanks spoke. Actually, we've been discussing that. You're turning 17 soon, the age Roger thought you should start your own journey. Luffy's eyes widened. You mean, my own crew? My own ship? That was always the plan, Rayleigh confirmed. Roger wanted you to have experiences beyond what we could teach you. To find your own path to becoming Pirate King. But with Silas actively hunting you, Shanks continued, we need to be strategic about how you begin. The East Blue is relatively peaceful, fewer marine patrols, lower bounties. It would be a good place to gather your initial crew without immediately drawing attention from admirals or warlords. Luffy frowned thoughtfully. Dad always said I should start at Reverse Mountain, enter the Grand Line properly. And you will, Rayleigh assured him. But first, build your crew, find your ship. The East Blue has many promising ports, Shells Town, Orange Town, Syrup Village, the Konomi Islands, and of course, Logue Town, though you should be especially careful there. Logue Town, Luffy repeated softly. The town where his father had died, where everything had changed. I should go there. Before the Grand Line. It feels right. Shanks nodded in understanding. A fitting place to begin the final leg of your journey to the Grand Line. But, Rayleigh interjected firmly, not before you've completed your training and gathered trusted companions. Roger didn't sail alone, and neither should you. How will I know who to choose? Luffy asked. For my crew, I mean. Shanks grinned. Oh, you'll know. The right people have a way of finding each other at sea. That reminds me, Rayleigh said, your father left something for you. I've been keeping it until you were ready to start your journey. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, weathered piece of paper. He wrote this the night before Logue Town. Luffy took the folded paper with slightly trembling hands. Whatever message Roger had left, it had remained sealed for 3 years, waiting for this moment. Unfolding it carefully, Luffy read, Luffy, if you're reading this, I'm already gone, and you're preparing to set sail on your own adventure. I've taught you everything I could about the sea, about strength, about freedom, but the most important lessons are still ahead, waiting for you to discover them yourself. Being Pirate King isn't about the treasure, the power, or even the title itself. It's about seeing the world through unclouded eyes, about living without regrets, about finding the nakama who make the journey worthwhile. Choose your crew carefully, Luffy. Not the strongest fighters or the most skilled navigators, but the people who share your spirit, who understand that true freedom comes from within, not from external circumstances. The One Piece is real. I promise you that. But what it reveals will mean nothing if you haven't experienced the journey fully, if you haven't found the right companions to share the truth with. I have no regrets about how I lived or how I died. My only sorrow is not seeing the man you'll become, the legend you'll create. But I know in my heart it will be magnificent, because you've always understood what matters most, not conquering the sea, but loving it. Not commanding respect, but earning it. Not taking freedom, but embodying it. The world is waiting for you, son. Show them what it truly means to be free. Jold, Roger, Dad, P.S. Don't forget to laugh. The greatest adventures should always include laughter. Tears rolled down Luffy's cheeks as he read the letter once, twice, a third time. He could almost hear Roger's voice speaking the words, could see his father's grin and the twinkle in his eye as he wrote that final postscript. He knew, Luffy said softly. He knew exactly when I'd be ready to leave. Roger always had an uncanny sense about these things, Rayleigh agreed, his own eyes suspiciously bright. He believed in you, Luffy. More than you know. Luffy carefully folded the letter and tucked it into his shirt, close to his heart. Then I better not disappoint him. How much longer until I'm ready, Uncle Ray? A few more months of intensive training, Rayleigh decided. There are still some hockey techniques I want you to master, and we need to refine your rubber abilities now that you've had this breakthrough in understanding them. And I need to arrange a suitable vessel, Shanks added. Nothing too flashy, you'll want to stay under the radar initially, but seaworthy enough for the East Blue. Luffy nodded, a new determination burning in his eyes. Then let's not waste any more time. I've got a promise to keep. The months that followed were the most intense of Luffy's training. Rayleigh pushed him harder than ever, drilling him in all 3 types of hockey until Luffy could use them instinctively. His rubber abilities evolved dramatically as well, now that he finally understood what Roger had been trying to teach him about working with his devil fruit rather than against it. He developed new techniques almost daily, Gomu Gomu no Rocket for rapid movement, Gomu Gomu no Stamp for powerful kicks, Gomu Gomu no Bazooka for devastating double palm strikes. But perhaps most significantly, he began incorporating hockey into his rubber attacks, something Rayleigh insisted would be crucial against powerful opponents. Armament hockey turns your rubber limbs from merely elastic to genuinely dangerous, Rayleigh explained as Luffy practiced hardening his stretched fist. It bypasses devil fruit defenses and strikes directly at an opponent's true body. It's harder to maintain when I'm stretching, Luffy complained, watching the black coating flicker and fade as his arm extended. Of course it is, Rayleigh acknowledged. You're spreading your haki over a larger area. That's why you need to focus on concentration and control. Through endless repetition and grueling training scenarios, Luffy gradually mastered the technique. By his 17th birthday, he could maintain armament haki through complex rubber attacks, combining elasticity with devastating impact. Observation haki came more naturally to him. Roger had always said Luffy had good instincts, and those instincts blossomed into genuine precognition under Rayleigh's guidance. Soon he could sense attacks before they came, could identify individual people by their haki signatures from impressive distances, could even perceive emotions and intentions with increasing accuracy. Conqueror's haki, the rarest form, which both Roger and Rayleigh possessed, manifested in Luffy during a particularly intense sparring match. When Rayleigh had pushed him to his absolute limit, something had broken loose inside Luffy, unleashing a wave of dominant will that knocked out several nearby wildlife and even made the seasoned Rayleigh pause momentarily. Just like your father, Rayleigh had said with a proud smile. The mark of a true king. Controlling this power proved more challenging than the others. Conqueror's haki came from the core of one's being, from absolute conviction in one's own path. Luffy had the potential in abundance but struggled with the fine control needed to direct it precisely. Don't force it, Rayleigh advised. Conqueror's haki isn't about domination through effort, it's about the natural expression of who you are. When you know, beyond any doubt, that your will is unbreakable, the haki flows naturally. Alongside the training, preparations for Luffy's departure progressed. Shanks acquired a small but sturdy boat, nothing fancy, but perfect for a beginning pirate in the East Blue. Supplies were gathered, maps procured, intelligence on marine movements collected. As the designated departure date approached, Luffy found himself growing both eager and nostalgic. This island had been his home for the past 3 years, and Rayleigh and Shanks the closest thing to family since Roger's execution. The night before his departure, the three of them sat around a campfire on the beach, sharing stories and sake, though Rayleigh still insisted Luffy was too young for more than a sip. I've been thinking about something, Luffy said during a lull in the conversation. About that day at Logue Town. About why Dad let himself be captured. Rayleigh and Shanks exchanged glances before Shanks asked, "What conclusion did you reach?" Luffy stared into the flames, unusually contemplative. He was dying anyway. We all knew that. But he could have gone out fighting, taken down a bunch of Marines with him. That would have been. I don't know, more like him, I guess. But? Rayleigh prompted. But he chose the execution. He chose to make it public, to say those words about the One Piece that started the great pirate era. Luffy looked up at his mentors. He wasn't just thinking about his own death. He was thinking about what came after. About the future of piracy itself. Shanks smiled slowly. You've grown wiser than your years, Luffy. Roger saw the bigger picture, Rayleigh confirmed. He knew the world government wanted to make an example of him, to show that even the Pirate King could be brought to justice. But he turned their victory into something else entirely. He made his execution into the starting line of a new race, Luffy realized. And everyone's been running it ever since. Including you, Shanks pointed out. Luffy nodded, fingers brushing the straw hat that rarely left his head. Including me. But I'm not running the same race as everyone else. Oh. Rayleigh raised an eyebrow. How so? Most pirates are searching for the One Piece because they want the treasure, the title, the power. Luffy's eyes reflected the dancing flames as he spoke. I want those things too, but not just for their own sake. I want what Dad really had, complete freedom. The kind that comes from inside, not from what you own or what people call you. He looked up at the star-filled sky, expression suddenly resembling Roger's so strongly that both older men felt a jolt of recognition. I'm going to be the Pirate King, Luffy stated with absolute certainty. Not because my dad was, but because that's the person with the most freedom in the world. And when I find the One Piece, I'll understand what Dad meant about it changing how you see everything. Rayleigh smiled, a profound sadness and pride mingling in his eyes. Roger would be so proud of you, Luffy. You truly are his son, not by blood, but by spirit. Shanks raised his sake cup. To Monkey D. Luffy, the future Pirate King. To Roger, Rayleigh added, raising his own cup. Who knew how to live, how to die, and how to inspire the next generation? Luffy held up his cup of juice. To freedom. The greatest treasure on all the seas. As their cups clinked together, a sense of completion settled over Luffy. One chapter of his life was ending, another beginning. Tomorrow, he would set sail alone, but soon, if Roger's legacy and his own instincts held true, he would find a Nakama who would share his journey to the top of the pirate world. Dawn broke clear and bright on the day of Luffy's departure. His small boat was loaded with provisions, maps, and a modest amount of treasure to get him started. He stood on the beach with Rayleigh and Shanks, saying his final goodbyes. Remember what we taught you, Rayleigh said, adjusting the straw hat on Luffy's head. Not just the fighting techniques, but the principles behind them. I will, Luffy promised. And I'll make you proud, Uncle Ray. You already have, Rayleigh replied, briefly pulling him into a tight hug before stepping back. Shanks approached next, handing Luffy a small, wrapped package. A parting gift. Open it when you're at sea. Thanks, Shanks. Luffy hesitated, then asked the question that had been on his mind for years. Will you be watching me? From a distance, I mean. Shanks grinned. Maybe occasionally. But not too closely. This is your adventure, Luffy, not mine. I've got my own path to follow in the new world. But if I ever really need you, I'll know, Shanks assured him. That's what this is for. He tapped his temple. Observation hockey works both ways. If you're ever in true danger, I'll sense it, no matter how far apart we are. This seemed to satisfy Luffy, who nodded and turned to his boat. I guess this is it then. One more thing, Rayleigh said. Your father had a particular way of starting journeys. A tradition, you might say. Luffy looked back curiously. What tradition? Rayleigh smiled. A declaration. Standing at the bow of his ship, he would announce his intentions to the sea itself, as if challenging it to try and stop him. A slow grin spread across Luffy's face. I like that. With newfound ceremony, he climbed into his boat and took position at its bow. As Rayleigh and Shanks pushed the vessel into the water, Luffy faced the open ocean, drew in a deep breath, and shouted with all the force his rubber lungs could muster, I'm Monkey D. Luffy. I'm gonna find the One Piece and become king of the pirates. His voice echoed across the water, a bold challenge to the world that awaited him. Rayleigh and Shanks watched from shore as Luffy unfurled the sail, catching the morning breeze that would carry him toward his destiny. Think he'll make it? Shanks asked quietly. Rayleigh's smile was tinged with both sadness and absolute certainty. Without a doubt. The real question is whether the world is ready for him. Alone on his small craft, with nothing but open water before him and the island receding behind, Luffy finally opened the package Shanks had given him. Inside was a blank bounty poster frame and a short note, for when you've made enough trouble to earn your first bounty. Make it a good one, Roger's record still stands, and I expect you to break it someday. Shanks Luffy laughed, tucking the frame away carefully. A bounty would come in time, once he'd assembled his crew and started making waves. For now, his first priority was finding those special people Roger had mentioned, the Nakama who would share his vision of freedom. As the morning progressed, Luffy sat cross-legged at the bow, practicing his observation hockey by tracking distant sea life. The peaceful routine was interrupted when his senses detected something large approaching from the depths. A sea king, he murmured, rising to his feet. Sure enough, the massive serpentine creature broke the surface nearby, its eyes fixing on Luffy's small boat with predatory intent. Most sailors would have panicked at the sight. These monsters were known to devour ships whole, but Luffy merely grinned. Perfect timing. I was getting hungry anyway. The Sea King lunged, jaws wide to swallow boat and passenger in one gulp. Luffy leapt into the air, arms stretching back as he imbued it with armament haki. Gomu Gomu no. Pistol. His blackened fist shot forward with devastating force, connecting squarely with the Sea King's head. The creature's momentum halted instantly, eyes rolling back as it collapsed backward into the sea, unconscious. Luffy landed nimbly back on his boat, already planning how to butcher his catch. Thanks for the meal. As he feasted on fresh Sea King meat an hour later, Luffy watched the horizon thoughtfully. This was just the beginning, a small taste of the adventures that awaited. Somewhere ahead were the people who would become his crew, the challenges that would test his resolve, and the mysteries Roger had refused to simply hand over. I'm on my way, Dad, he said to the open sky. Just like I promised. 3 days later, Luffy's small boat approached a modest port town, his first stop on what would become a legendary journey. According to Rayleigh's maps, this was Shell's town, home to a marine base but otherwise unremarkable. Perfect place to start gathering information, Luffy muttered as he guided his vessel toward the harbor. And maybe find my first crewmate. He'd just secured his boat when a commotion drew his attention to the town square. A crowd had gathered, watching as marine soldiers led a man in torn clothes through the streets. The prisoner's most striking feature was his unusual green hair, and despite being bound, he carried himself with unmistakable dignity. That's Roronoa Zoro, a nearby fisherman commented, noticing Luffy's interest. Demon of the East Blue, they call him. Captured by the Marines last week. They're executing him in 3 days. Executing him? For what? Killed some Marine officer's pet wolf, supposedly. But really, it's because he's been hunting down pirate bounties that the Marines wanted for themselves. Captain Morgan runs this base like his personal kingdom. Luffy watched the swordsman with growing interest. There was something in the man's bearing, in the defiant tilt of his chin despite his circumstances, that resonated with Luffy immediately. Roronoa Zoro, he repeated, testing the name. A slow smile spread across his face as he adjusted his straw hat. I think I just found my first crewmate. The fisherman laughed incredulously. You want a demon on your crew? What are you, a pirate or something? Luffy's grin widened. Yep. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm gonna be king of the pirates. The man's laughter died as he took in Luffy's confident declaration. Something about the boy's absolute certainty made the ridiculous claim seem suddenly plausible. Well, good luck with that, the fisherman finally said, backing away slightly. And with Zoro. You'll need it, Captain Morgan doesn't let go of his prisoners easily. That's okay, Luffy replied cheerfully, already striding toward the marine base with purpose in his step. I don't give up easily either. As he walked, memories of Roger's lessons about crew selection played through his mind. Your first crewmate sets the tone, Luffy, Roger had advised during one of their final conversations. Choose someone strong, yes, but more importantly, choose someone who challenges you, who pushes you to be better than you are. The best captains aren't those who find perfect subordinates, they're the ones who find perfect complements to their own strengths and weaknesses. Luffy had a feeling, watching the way Zoro carried himself even in chains, that the swordsman might be exactly that, a complement to his own wild, instinctive approach. Someone disciplined, focused, with his own unbreakable dream. Just you wait, Zoro, Luffy murmured, a new adventure already taking shape in his mind. We're gonna shock the world together. As he approached the marine base, its imposing gates looming ahead, Luffy felt no fear, only excitement and absolute certainty. This was how it began. Not with grand fleets or legendary battles, but with one determined young man, a straw hat, and a promise to change the world. The legacy of GOLD, Roger lived on, not as a carbon copy, but as something new and uniquely Luffy's own. The son had learned from the father, had inherited his will and his dream of ultimate freedom, but would forge his own path to achieving it. A new dawn had truly begun, not just for Luffy, but for the entire world of pirates. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.